this isn't in America's interest for there to be this conflict in the Middle East. It exposes our troops to risk. It exposes the region, the Gulf, to risk, both in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, also our partners in the region. And of course, it continues a regional escalation that began with Gaza, where we continue to see incredible suffering and harm that is not only damaging to the Palestinian people, that is damaging as well to Israel's long-term security and peace, and that is damaging to America's global leadership and credibility.
Iran has warned the United States, France and the UK that it will strike ships and military bases if they offer any support to Israel to stop retaliatory strikes from Tehran. Iran launched strikes on Israel overnight, killing at least 3 people and injuring several dozen more. Iran said that Israelis' attack earlier on Friday morning killed at least 78 people. British former ambassador to Iran, Richard Dalton, told Times Radio Breakfast this morning that the sudden escalation in hostility is a direct result of a controversial decision President Trump made in his first term.
The world is reaping the consequences of the United States' destructive decision under Trump in 2017 to destroy, at Israel's behest, the very real, very effective international agreement endorsed by the entire world, under which Iran's nuclear program was limited, monitored, and supervised to ensure that nuclear materials could not be diverted to a military.
But if Iran were not following,
it was utter folly,
right,
to destroy that agreement.
Well, that was former British ambassador to Iran, Richard Dalton, speaking to Callum MacDonald on Times Radio Breakfast this morning. Well, joining us now is Josh Paul, former State Department official who quit over Israel and co-founded a new policy, a lobbying organisation that supports a new approach to US foreign policy in the Middle East. And Josh is here in the studio with me. Thank you for making your way in.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Just to get your reaction to what we've seen in the past 48 hours.
So I think it is absolutely unnecessary is the word that comes to mind. This was not a situation where Iran was on the verge of obtaining a nuclear weapon. In fact, just in March, the US Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, provided the US intelligence community's official assessment that Iran is not currently working on a nuclear weapon and indeed has not had an authorization to do so since 2003. So it seems that talk of this being a preemptive strike of some sort is nonsense, unless we are talking, of course, about preempting the diplomacy that was ongoing, the negotiations between the US and Iran to reopen that framework, those talks around Iran's program, or unless we are talking about an attempt to essentially preempt a normalization between the US, Iran, and the Arab world that only 2 years ago Israel thought would be centered around itself.
Now, you served in the State Department under Presidents Bush, Obama, Biden, Donald Trump as well in his first term. Looking at that first term, how significant was Donald Trump's pulling out of those negotiations, those agreements with Iran?
Well, as Ambassador Dalton said, it was crucial and it has led us here. But he also said that, of course, it was pushed by Israel, that decision to pull out was driven by Israel. And in fact, the ability of Donald Trump to withdraw from that agreement was also fundamentally down to Israel's efforts to ensure that the US agreement with Iran was not a Senate-ratified treaty. It was not an agreement that went through the Senate, which the president would not have been able to step back from. But from the very start, Israel weakened the treaty or weakened the agreement and then pressed Donald Trump to withdraw. And I think we do see the consequences of that now, because if that treaty was still in place, there would be safeguards, there would be observation. This was, in fact, the most detailed and complex treaty or agreement ever when it comes to oversight of nuclear facilities, the most intrusive inspections, and instead, here we are.
Josh, you released a statement through a new policy, which is your lobby group that we've been talking about. And you've been saying that what is at the heart of what we're seeing today, the tensions that we're seeing today, is this unconditional US military support of Israel. You claim that it's not in America's interest. Tell us why you've reached that decision or that opinion.
Well, on this specific issue, I think it's very clear that the tail is wagging the dog. Just 2 days ago, Donald Trump was saying publicly that he hoped Israel would not conduct an attack. The immediate reaction from the United States after Israel did so was from Secretary of State Rubio, who put out a tweet making very clear that the United States had nothing to do with it. And yet, as it became clear that this was happening and that Israel was having, as it has indeed, some significant success, I think Donald Trump had to sort of catch up, not to be embarrassed, and to go all in, as it were. I think that's unfortunate because this isn't in America's interest for there to be this conflict in the Middle East. It exposes our troops to risk. It exposes the region, the Gulf, to risk, both in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, also our partners in the region. And of course, it continues a regional escalation that began with Gaza, where we continue to see incredible suffering and harm that is not only damaging to the Palestinian people, that is damaging as well to Israel's long-term security and peace, and that is damaging to America's global leadership and credibility. And this is something that I've seen play out time and time again, both inside the US government and since leaving. If you talk to elected officials, United States senators behind closed doors, many of them will tell you what we are doing is wrong. It is not in America's interest. Our weapons are being used by Israel to commit war crimes, but I can't say that publicly. And so that's what my organization is trying to get at, trying to give our elected officials, the support they need to be able to just state the facts publicly.
Okay. I mean, many people will take issue at Israel committing war crimes. They believe that Israel is taking these actions in order to preserve itself, self-preservation and self-defense. But let's put that to one side for a second. This attack on Iran was so detailed. A lot of military experts are saying this was something that must have been years in the planning and the making. So are you saying that this has happened without American involvement?
No, I'm sure that there was certainly tactical coordination. Israel has said that it made America aware of its attack plans immediately before the attack. The US and then in turn has conveyed those plans as a warning to its Gulf partners. But that doesn't mean that the US was happy about it. I think that's the difference here, that Israel has the freedom, has the flexibility to lead in a direction and pull the United States behind it. Essentially, it is an Israel-first policy that is not in America's interest.
So are you saying that America has lost the leverage that it has over Israel? Is it unable to control what Benjamin Netanyahu, the decisions that he takes, particularly military decisions?
It is unwilling to do so. I don't think it's unable to do so. I think the United States has an incredible amount of leverage should it wish to exert it. The problem is a political one in America where, as of now, the apparent cost of doing so outweighs the global or geopolitical implications of doing so. And I think that's a problem for us in America that we need to address and overcome, because that's a problem for our politics and our policies.
I mean, you're highly critical of this unconditional US military support to Israel, but you must also acknowledge that without that support, Israel's very existence would be under threat. It is surrounded by countries and regimes whose political and ideological aim is to see the eradication of Israel.
No, it's not. It's surrounded by countries mostly that are partners.
Well, Iran would like to see Israel be wiped off the map.
But it is not surrounded by Iran. Iran is a distant country.
It's close enough.
With a very weakened military. And I think you are right that certainly Iran does pose a threat to Israel, as Israel, as we've seen, does to Iran. In a way, the two are twinned in the utility of the threat, both of them using that to sustain their own security modalities, their own, internal regime dynamics, as it were. But at the same time, I think that as we have a responsibility, the United States, as the more powerful partner, the senior partner in the relationship, to drive things in a direction of peace. And that's what the nuclear agreement with Iran was about. That's what efforts to normalize within the region are about. And that's what efforts to end the suffering in Gaza are about. At the end of the day, to move things in a positive direction that Israel, unfortunately, seems unable to identify or to move towards.
So moving forward then, Josh, even though we're going to see, I think it's at 6 o'clock local time this afternoon in Washington, a military parade for Donald Trump. It is fair to say that Donald Trump avoids conflict. He seems to be particularly allergic to starting wars, continuing wars. That has been his message to his followers. He wants to end conflicts and wants to pull troops out, of course, famously from Afghanistan, even though that happened under Joe Biden, but it was started under Donald Trump. So some people will say, look, it is a positive thing that the current president of the US doesn't seem gung-ho in sending troops across the world. So where do we go next? How can Donald Trump use America's military might and support to de-escalate what we're seeing in the Middle East at the moment?
So I think there are several and plenty of options. The most significant of those would be to use America's military equipment, the equipment that we send to Israel, paid for greatly by American taxpayer dollars, as that leverage to withhold certain arms, particularly, for example, spare parts for F-35 fighter jets, which are required in order to keep those jets operating, as a signal and as a means of pulling Israel back from the brink, because Israel has not seemed willing to listen to simple sort of lip service. I don't think that is going to happen, unfortunately. I think that until we build a head of steam in American politics, until it is apparent within American politics that there is a cost for pursuing a policy that is Israel first, rather than putting America's interests first, I think that we are going to continue to be dragged down the same path of regional discord and global instability.
I know that you function very much in the corridors of power in Washington, but this week is going to see a G7 gathering in Canada. What do you think that Keir Starmer should be saying to Donald Trump when it comes to what we're seeing in the Middle East?
So I think Keir Starmer is in a really important place. I think that the UK's voice is still the most important voice of any partner in Washington, D.C. We did see in the last week the UK announce sanctions against 2 Israeli ministers. That is certainly a start, although I would note that they are part of a broader government and indeed a trend within Israeli politics that deserves more than the sanctioning of 2 ministers. At the same time, the UK apparently declined to join a French effort to recognize a Palestinian state in the upcoming week, contributing to the postponement of that conference. So I think Keir Starmer needs to make the case that he can only hold out for so long, that pressure is mounting here in the UK, and I've seen that in my days here this past week, and that the US needs to push Israel in a positive direction that addresses the humanitarian suffering in Gaza and brings the conflict to a close, because that is in Europe's interest and in America's.
I just want to put something that's come in on our text board here, messaging board. It's an anonymous message, but it says Iran being now in a weakened state, which you were telling us in the beginning of this interview, that's exactly what the Israel attack is now perfectly timed. Do you think that that's a good point, well made, that for Israel, Iran is one of its biggest adversaries, and the time to strike is the time where your adversary is in a weakened condition?
In the short term, I think that's true. I think the problem is that in the long term, you first of all set very clearly the lesson that deterrence does not come from peacemaking or from international law. It comes from nuclear weapons. And I think that Iran and other countries who are observing will now understand the importance of rushing towards that, which is dangerous for all of us. I think that it is also Israel's interest not only to strike Iran, but to permanently weaken it, to essentially lead to a failed regime and a state in which Israel has, continued freedom of operations, essentially to turn Iran into Syria. And I think that, Israel's preferred options for the countries around it are either regimes that are allied with it, strong and on its side, but repressive of their own populations, or that are failed states. And that is not a sustainable, option or set of options for a stable Middle East.
Okay. Josh, thank you so much for coming into the studio. We used up all our time, but really fascinating to hear your thoughts. Josh Paul there, former State Department official who quit over Israel, co-founder of A New Policy, which is a lobbying organisation that supports a new approach to US foreign policy in the Middle East.